Sly Cooper. Sly Cooper is my favorite video game series of all time. No other video game comes close to what Cooper did for me over the years. His charismatic personality, his best friends that help him out at any jam, or his unrequited love interest, Sly Cooper always has a very telling story that I feel needs to be told a lot more and needs to reach more audiences. Unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in limbo for Sly Cooper because Sly 5 may never come to see the light, but the best thing I can do is just come out with videos that show my love for the raccoon. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So for these next couple of videos I plan on releasing, I will be covering some of Sly's greatest and yet questionable villains throughout history. Sly Cooper's had some of the most maniacal, conniving, and backstabbing villains over the years. Then he's had some villains that were kinda like they didn't really need to be there, or they could have at least been done differently to make them stand out more. But, you know, either way, I still love all these villains, just for different reasons, and then other ones I felt like had potential but could have been executed a bit better. So without ado, let's get into this video. For today's video, we're going to be covering Sly's worst villains. When I did the math of Sly Cooper villains, I found out that Sly had a total of 23 villains, and if you combine two of them, it's a total of 22, and if you take away two villains that became good guys later on, it's actually a total of 20. So believe it or not, I'm actually going to be splitting this video up into two sections: top 10 greatest Sly villains and top 10 worst Sly villains, with the exclusion of Panda King and Dimitri because they became good guys later for Sly, and then a combination of two villains into one because one character played a villain twice in this series, but we're going to cover them later on. So without further ado, let's get into this video and let's cover some of Sly Cooper's villains that I deem as the worst he's ever faced throughout history. Number 10, John Benson. Okay guys, I'm gonna be honest with you. The only reason John Benson makes this top 10 worst list is because I needed someone to fill the 10th spot. Because remember, we're doing 20 villains, minus the two that I excluded from the list, and then combining two into one, which is basically the same character. So aside from that, John Benson is actually a really good villain of the Sly Cooper series, and let's go over the reason why I think so. So, John Benson's origins is basically that of a reverse Captain America. John Benson was born during the early 1800s as a part of the gold rush during 1852, in which he would search for gold throughout the land. He actually blew up the side of a mountain in order to get some more gold, but ended up being buried alive in the snow, freezing him alive. However, due to global warming, he would defrost later on and would end up tearing apart all of Canada in order to quote-unquote tame the wild north by damming every river and chopping all the trees down. He would later meet up with and join the Claw Gang and become the spice shipper with all his Iron Horse trains. Again, John Benson is not a bad villain. He's actually one of the better ones in this series. First of all, he got 4 different clockwork parts: the stomach, both of the lungs, and the talons. That is actually crazy considering that the other Claw Gang members only managed 2 or 3 pieces at max, but my man came away with 4 of them. So that, you know, that's the ultimate Chad moment right there. Secondly, he was the first ever Sly villain that saw through the Cooper Gang's disguises, and all the while finding their hideout so he could steal the other clockwork parts and sell them to Arpeggio, along with his talents. There's only been one other Sly Cooper villain that was able to see through the gang's disguises and expose their hideout, but we'll cover them in the next video that I do. And thirdly, he's literally tearing up the environment with little to no regard for it whatsoever. But I can't really blame that on him, as more so that was just the way he was in his time period growing up. So I just, you have to look at it from both lenses. And though the end credits show that he actually changed his ways for the better, helping Epper to rescue animals from danger, my man actually ended up getting frozen in time again on a mission trying to save penguins. So yeah, that's a bit of hard irony for such a good character in my opinion. John Benson is basically what Shakespeare would call a tragic villain, per se. Someone who's a victim of their circumstances rather than their cruel intentions. Even Sly himself said he felt sorry for Benson because of this. And while John ranks 10 here because even though he did some cruel things in his time alive, it was more so what his time period claimed to be as heroic. So, to me, he's definitely one of the more underrated Sly villains in the series. Not as great as some of the other ones that I'll cover, but he's definitely one of the more underrated Sly villains in my opinion, and someone you guys should definitely consider when ranking him in your top 10 list. Okay, number 9. I'll take a number 9, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra betrayal on it. Nah, guys, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. But, okay, but yeah, so number 9 on the list is actually the character that I combined the two into one. But, yeah, it's Penelope from Sly 3 and Sly 4. Okay, so I know this inclusion is gonna be controversial for many Sly fans, but I had to put her in here because of what she did to the Cooper gang on a personal level. So, but let's go over her origin story. So Penelope is a house mouse, a house mouse breed that joined the Cooper gang after the events of Holland. She was offered a chance to be a part of the Cooper gang for the vault job, but she declined, saying she only works for the best, and the best, quote unquote, was herself under the guise of the Black Baron. She created the Black Baron persona as a way of joining an illegal airplane dogfighting league, which she won, and then became an underground celebrity for it, and created the game Aces, where she remained undefeated before losing to the Cooper gang in that same game, while also getting caught as being the one who was the Black Baron. Believed that she no longer had to keep up that guise, she joined the Cooper gang and acted as the RC pilot for the Cooper job vault, helping the Cooper gang out with opening the vault and retrieving all of Sly's inheritance, while also gaining her fair share of the money as well, because Sly didn't want to do the criminal stuff anymore. At least until Sly 4 came along, but we'll cover that later. After that, she began a new life with Bentley, and it seemed like everything was going to end on a happy note for everybody. However, time changes people. I know, that was a terrible joke. Terrible Sly 4 joke. I know. At the beginning of Sly 4, Penelope and Bentley still seemed to be very happy together. But then for some reason, Penelope went missing, much to Bentley's worry. However, because of the Thievius Raccoonus history being erased, Bentley couldn't focus too much time on figuring out where Penelope was. He had to save Sly's legacy. So he rounded up the Cooper gang to help figure out what was going on with the Thievius Raccoonus. However, Penelope would resurface later again during the Cooper gang's mission in medieval England with Sir Gareth Cooper. Only this time, she was under the guise of the villain named the Black Knight. Seriously, what is with Penelope and the color black? As it turns out, Penelope was one of, if not the main contributor to what was happening to the Cooper family line getting erased. She stole the time machine blueprints from Bentley and sold them to another villain that we'll cover in a second, who used it as a way of erasing the Cooper legacy for good. Penelope's motives behind the betrayal was that she felt that Bentley's potential was being wasted by Sly's honorable thief code, and that he could literally be the next Elon Musk in the Sly universe if he truly wanted to be. And to be honest, Penelope's explanation to me actually has some great merit to it. Considering what Bentley accomplished in his years with the Cooper gang, I can understand why she would feel that way. But going out of her way to literally erase Sly, Bentley's only best friend next to Murray, is definitely too malicious of an act. Bentley retreated to his shell because he was so depressed over what was happening, leaving Sly, Murray, Carmelita, and Sir Gareth to be the only ones to fight Penelope themselves. All four of them would end up getting captured, but Bentley returned just in the nick of time to help and managed to stop Penelope himself and save the others. Penelope was then arrested and sent to Europe's highest security prison, but she managed to escape, and has been sending Bentley a bunch of mysterious postcards hinting that she will return in the future. You know, if Sly 5 ever comes out, that is. Penelope is a tricky one to rank on this list because even though it seemed like she was nice at first, she ultimately just wanted everything for herself. She managed to betray the Cooper gang and Bentley's heart. But was it truly warranted? She ultimately felt like a ripoff of a certain character in Sly 2 who I felt executed their plan much better. And yes, what she did was terrible, but do we know what her true motives were? Did she do it for the money, or did she do it because she loved Bentley? Her placement on this list depends on what she does in Sly 5, and whether or not she can be considered redeemable or unforgivable. But for now, I have her number 9 on this list because even though she seemed nice at first, she definitely seems like she's someone who's out for herself rather than for other people. So for now, I'm just going to consider her a villain, but she's definitely not the worst one by far. Number 8. The Paradox from Sly 4. This skunk stinks. I mean, literally. P.U. Ugh, shoot, someone get the tomato juice, please. The Paradox is the main villain of Sly 4, and I'm gonna be honest, he's probably the worst main villain of a Sly game in my opinion, but that doesn't mean he's not without his wild acts. Trust me, he has his moments in here. He met up with Penelope and bought the time machine blueprints from her that allowed him to help create a group of villains that would help him erase Sly's family lineage from history. So, same plot as Clockwork per se, but a different plan of going about it. And I'm gonna be honest, I truly felt unaccomplished after beating him in Sly 4. I'm gonna be truly honest with you guys. Because, like I said, same thing as Clockwork, he feels like a knockoff version of Clockwork in a sense. Someone who hated the Cooper lineage and would do whatever he could to erase them from history. Him doing it for his dad does make it, relatable for some who felt like they've been dishonored in their history because of what happened to their father. But, I say that docks him in terms of evil points, I would say, because unlike Clockwork, jealousy more so drives him rather than hate, as to where with Clockwork, hate is literally fueling him every second of his ounce of being, at least when he was alive. So, one thing I will say though, if there's anything that prevents him from being lower on this worst list, it's the fact that he committed one of the most heinous acts of the series. He got Sly stranded on the blimp that got destroyed during their fight and got Sly stuck in ancient Egypt, which means that the Sly Cooper series is in the biggest wormhole that they may never crawl out of. The possibility of a new Sly game. Oh, Sly 5, will you ever come out? Number 7. Toothpick from Sly 4. Every Sly Cooper's villains list has this guy either in the top 10 greatest villains or the top 10 most hated Cooper villains. Someone like me sees it as a half full, half glass empty type of ordeal for Toothpick. I'll give credit where credit's due though, this guy has a ton of personality to him. In fact, I think Sly 4's villains definitely have a lot of personality to them, but I just feel that that's just because of the cartoony direction that Sly 4 took. Toothpick is a self-absorbed armadillo that thinks the world revolves around him, literally putting up posters of himself all over town of Tennessee Kid Cooper's area in the Wild Wild West. Toothpick would steal the gold that Tennessee Kid was supposed to steal and frame him for the crime anyway, while he ended up becoming the sheriff of the town and basically the town's president, quote-unquote per se. He also managed to take Carmelita hostage after the Paradox kidnapped Carmelita from the original world and sent her into the Old West with Toothpick. And all the while managing to arrest the Cooper gang in the process because Tennessee was distracted trying to save Carmelita. Luckily, the Cooper gang escaped and they managed to stop Toothpick from returning to the present with the stolen gold, which would have made him a millionaire in that time period. Because of this, Toothpick ended up getting stuck in the 1800s Wild West with Tennessee, and he was arrested and charged with stealing the gold instead. He would later join a chain gang, but became deaf after the loud whistles from the train kept harming him during his time in jail. And unfortunately, while with the chain gang, he was breaking up rocks along the train tracks, and poor Toothpick never heard the train coming from behind him. Yeah, this is actually one of the more darker moments of Sly 4. Sly 4 was pretty tame on the dark moments, but this was actually a real dark one if you think about it. Toothpick is a crazy dude full of life, but he's actually pretty darn annoying in my opinion. But that's what makes him one of the more unique villains in the series. However, compared to other Sly villains, I still think he's on the lower half of great villains, leads into the category of worst villains, but he's someone that I can say I definitely like as a character and as a Sly villain because he just feels like someone that you would just hate to want to put up with, especially while on a job with something. Number 6. El Jefe from Sly 4. Now we're starting to move into the territory of Sly Cooper villains that I just truly do not care for, and it's going to be like picking teeth trying to talk about the things I actually do remotely like about them. As to where the first 4 members on this list I actually did like or had some type of like understanding as to why, you know, they were good characters. But these next 6 are just characters that I felt like were either overblown or just too bland for their own liking. So let's get into El Jefe. El Jefe is a hired mercenary from the Paradox, a tiger that managed to escape Interpol for so long thanks to its quick wits and deadly fighting style. The Paradox hired him to help steal Ryoichi's cane and erase the Cooper legacy. In the end, he was ultimately thwarted by Sly and company, even though he still managed to steal the cane for the Paradox, so he actually succeeded in what he was trying to do, even though he lost the fight to Sly. So, at first glimpse, El Jefe actually looks and seems very menacing, but I just feel that his character got screwed up because he's constantly making jokes as he's fighting Sly. That to me takes away from his menacing nature and ultimately drags him out as some wannabe tough guy who actually can kick your butt if he wants to, but he just decides to be a chicken and run away half the time. I mean, considering he had 3 blind mice break him out of prison and help him conquer an entire country, that's actually pretty darn impressive, but I just feel that just makes him more look like someone who would rather have other people do his bidding rather than work for it himself. Even though in his fight he can put up a pretty darn good beating on Sly without any real power-ups. But those jokes are what just kills him for me. Ultimately, he's one of Sly's more powerful foes, so I'll give him that, but his character is just way too funny for my liking. He should have just been more like Mugshot in terms of like being funny unintentionally, but still being, you know, like that don't mess with me type of guy. Number 5. Sir Raleigh the Frog from Sly 1. I actually have a soft spot for Sir Raleigh the Frog because he's literally the first ever Sly Cooper villain, but he's literally not that menacing of a villain. According to Interpol's files, he was once a rich man who grew bored of his life of luxury, so he began raiding pirate ships for their loot and developing machinery for his own evil empire, such as his blimp, which allows his area, the Isle of Wrath, to stay constantly raining so that he can plunder ships for their loot. He seems to have little to no regard for his contemporaries either, having his employees work 24/7 in the rain and inside the machine, and even ratting out Mugshot to Sly after he'd been defeated by Sly. He was arrested by Carmelita and sentenced to prison, which he's still in currently as according to the Sly comic issue number 2. His motivation for being evil is really darn generic. Becoming evil because you got bored of your rich life where you can do whatever you want is actually rather stupid. But unfortunately, we've seen stuff like this happen in the real world, so I'm actually not too bothered by this backstory. Plus, his boss fight is just so bland, and it's relatively easy, even though 10-year-old me couldn't beat this mission for the life of me growing up for whatever reason. If there's any reason for me to even remotely like Sir Raleigh, it's because of nostalgia I had for him when I played the first ever Sly Cooper game. So he definitely earns a spot in my heart for setting the trend of Sly games that would come out. But again, he's just not that menacing of a villain when you get down to it. Number 4. The Grizz. Okay, so the Grizz is a character. He is quite the character. I just think the stereotypes kill this character for me. It's not even the fact that he acts as this wannabe rapper slash artist. It's the fact that he relishes in it too much for his own good. First, we see the Grizz in the caveman time period of Sly 4. His goal, aside from stealing Bob's cane, is to paint art in the caveman times, then go back to the future and dig it up so that he can sell that for a fortune. Okay, points for the evil scheme, I give him that. But then you start leaning more into his character's personality, and it could either be a hit or miss for anybody playing this game. For me, he definitely gave me a couple of laughs, but not laughs as in I thought he was funny, laughs as in what is this character's motivations? To ice skate? To become a rapper while in jail? The frustrated artist backstory, he does give me Dimitri vibes, but Dimitri's character is more so flavorful as to where Grizz's character just feels like another knockoff version in the Sly universe. So while Grizz does have a ton of character, it just feels like it's more so based off the stereotypes rather than the originality. Number 3. Ms. Ruby from Sly 1. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty freaked out by Ms. Ruby's area as a kid. Mainly because growing up I had a giant fear of spiders. So every time I started Ms. Ruby's area, spiders would fall from the tree to try and attack you, and my chicken self would quit the game every time and restart the Sly game in hopes of it never happening. However, if I was still 10 years old, I would say she definitely would have been in the top 10 villains easily because of her area. But growing up and containing my fear of spiders and actually learning about this level, I just started to feel that Miss Ruby's character felt so tacked on in this game. She grew up interested in creepy stuff, and other kids avoided her because they thought she was very scary and creepy to be around. So because of this, she studied voodoo and used it to punish the world for shunning her as a kid. She managed to bring the dead creatures and inanimate objects to life, which helped forge their empire, and it ended up being taken down by the Cooper gang as she was busted by Interpol for her crimes. So don't get me wrong, she can give you the shakes if you aren't ready for it, but once you start playing her world and getting to know her more, she just starts to feel like she's just kinda there to be there. Plus, given that she hasn't made an appearance in the Sly game since Sly 1, the only time we ever hear from her again was in the issue number 2 comic of Sly, where her and, Sir Volley are still stuck in prison after their actions from Sly 1. But her menacing nature, abuse of power, and the fact that she had some of the hardest, and I mean the hardest, Sly Cooper missions ever, Chicken Run and her boss fight being 2 of them, prevents her from ranking any higher on this worst list. And I actually did feel a little accomplished beating her. Number 2. Miss Decibel from Sly 4. Again, another Sly 4 villain on here. Guys, I'm sorry, it's not that I hate Sly 4, I just truly think they missed the mark with certain aspects of the game. But if there's anything that I'm certain of, it's the fact that Miss Decibel has gotta be my least favorite villain ever. Not just Sly Cooper villain, but villains in general. She actually makes me miss Miss Ruby from the first game. Okay, so to go into detail, Miss Decibel is a music student that had a decent talent, but everyone hated her music. Coupled with the fact that she had an explosive temper, she ended up causing her own trumpet to get lodged into her trunk, which ended up giving her the power to mind control people with her abilities. So, surprise surprise, she ended up becoming a villain to get back at the world for booing her. She later paired up with the Paradox to help him erase Sly's family history. And apparently the two had a thing for each other, but the Paradox, quote unquote shockingly, only used her for the mission of grabbing Sly's cane, while also telling Miss Decibel that she's ugly and that her music stinks worse than the Paradox's skunk scent. Ouch. So she gets captured by the Cooper gang, in which Salim Al-Kupar then stuffs a trumpet with a cork to prevent her from using it again. I'm not gonna lie, that part actually cracked me up. Because that lady put Salim through so much. And all I can just see is Salim with the cork just stuffing her nose with it. So anyway, back to Miss Decibel. According to her credits screen ending, she actually decided to turn the other cheek and help inmates learn music, and if she could keep this good behavior going, she gets an early parole. Okay, I can respect that. You want to change your ways and become good for the better of mankind. That's actually very respectable. But Miss Decibel's issue is similar to that of Miss Ruby. She just feels like a villain who's just tacked on just so Sly 4's rogue gallery can be filled up. But I can't even fault Sansaru Games for that. I truly feel like the tight deadlines Sony put on them, plus the game being pushed back a year, didn't help matters. But I just knew from the moment I saw Miss Decibel's origin story that she was just going to be another afterthought of a Sly villain. So overall, Miss Decibel is probably the worst Sly villain in terms of her being evil, but at least she has some personality to her. The number one on this list, however, begs to differ. Okay, so before we get into our number one, let's recap on some of the villains that I mentioned in this worst list. Number 10 worst, John Benson. Number 9, Penelope. Number 8, La Paradox. Number 7, Toothpick. Number 6, El Jefe. Number 5, Sir Volley. Number 4, the Grizz. Number 3, Ms. Ruby. Number 2, Miss Decibel. And with that, let's talk about our number one worst Sly Cooper villain. This villain is easily the most pointless Sly villain that I have ever seen in a Sly game, and it took me years to realize this because I was blinded by my love for this Sly game in particular. But ladies and gentlemen, the number one worst Sly Cooper villain of all time, in my opinion, is the Mask of Dark Earth from Sly 3. I don't know why they thought having a mask as a villain was going to be a good idea to begin with. To me, it's just a lame idea. I mean, I get what they were trying to go for, but they could have handled it much, much better. It doesn't have any personality, emotions, or motives to it, except the fact that it takes control of people. And not even like in a cool parasitic type way like Venom the Spider-Man or the exosuit from My Life as a Teenage Robot. It's literally just there to escape, as Bentley says. Was this villain created because of Sly 3's rushed development of production? Probably. It also suffers from the same problem Miss Decibel has in terms of like it feels just tacked on because like I said, Sly 3 was developed in under a year, so I felt like the creators of the game were rushing to get this game out and just didn't know what to do for another character, so they just threw this character in just for the sake of it. So yeah, I don't know what they were thinking with this character. And honestly, it just, I don't know what else to say about it. I just truly think if they had gone the Venom approach with this mask, I think it would have made for a cooler concept. But in the end, the Mask of Dark Earth is literally there just to serve as a basic antagonist for the Guru's area of Sly 3. Thus making it the worst Sly villain in my opinion, because it basically holds no point to any Sly story. Okay guys, so that was my top 10 worst Sly Cooper villains list. Honestly, this list just felt like top 5 decent Sly Cooper villains and then top 5 worst Sly Cooper villains. But I expected that because there was literally 20 villains altogether. So what are your guys' opinions on this video or the rankings? Leave a comment below, tell me what you think about it, if I'm right or if I'm super duper wrong. You know, everyone's allowed to have an opinion. This is mine. But I hope to see you guys in the next video that I do, which is the top 10 greatest Sly Cooper villains of all time. And boy, is that one going to be special to me. So, this was Lancey, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.